Girivardhari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Vannachari Yamunatira Vannachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Vannachari Yamunatira Vannachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajak Ashtottara Shata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai Jaya Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajak Ashtottara Shata Shri Srimad Srila Bhakti Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Primsai Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shamakund Radhakund Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavandam Ki Jai Navadvipdam Ki Jai Mathuradam Ki Jai Jagannath Puridam Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Tulasi Devi Ki Jai Yamuna Maya Ki Jai Ganga Maya Ki Jai Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 18, Text 2. Brahmakopa Uthittat Yaha Tu Kakshakat Prana Viplavat Na Samumoha Uru Bayat Bhagavati Arpita Ashayaha Brahmakopot Titadyastu Titadyastu Takshakat Pranaviplavat Nasamu Mohorubayad Bhagavatyarpitashaya Brahmakopo Titadyastu Takshakat Pranaviplavat Nasamu Mohorubayad Bhagavatyarpitashaya Brahmakopo Titadyastu Takshakat Pranaviplavat Nasamu Mohorubayad Bhagavatyarpitashaya
Takshakat Prana Viplavat Samumo
Samomohorubhayad
Rupayat
Brahmakopo Titadyastu Takshakat Pranaviplavat Nasamumohorubhayad Bhagavatyarpitashaya Brahmakopo Titadyastu
Viplavat
Takshakat
Nasamu Moharubayat Bhagavatyarpita Shayaha
Bhagavatyarpitashaya
Brahmakopotitadyastu
Brahmakopo Titadyastu
Takshakat Prana Viplavat
Takshakat Pranaviplavat
Nasamu Mohorubayat
Nasamumohorubhayad
Bhagavatyarpita Shayaha
Bhagavatyarpitashaya Brahmakopo
Otitadyastu Takshakat Panaviplavat Nasamomu Harubhayat
Nasamumohorubhayad Bhagavatyarpitashaya. Any Zoom chanters? Brahmakopa, fury of a Brahmana. Uttatat, cursed by. Yaha, what was. Tu, but. Takshakat, by the snake bird. Pranaviplavat, from dissolution of life. Na, never. Samumoha, was overwhelmed. Urubayat, great fear. Bhagavati, under the personality of Godhead. Arpita, surrendered. Ashayaha, consciousness. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Furthermore, Maharaj Parikshit was always consciously surrendered to the personality of Godhead, and therefore he was neither afraid nor overwhelmed by fear due to a snake bird, which was to bite him because of the fury of a Brahmana boy. Purport. A self-surrendered devotee of the Lord is called Narayana Parayana. Such a person is never afraid of any place or person, not even of death. For him, nothing is as important as the Supreme Lord, and thus he gives equal importance to heaven and hell. He knows well that both heaven and hell are creations of the Lord, and similarly, life and death are different conditions of existence created by the Lord. But in all conditions and in all circumstances, remembrance of Narayana is essential. The Narayana Parayana practices this constantly. Maharaj Parikshit was such a pure devotee. He was wrongfully cursed by an inexperienced son of a Brahmana who was under the influence of Kali, and Maharaj Parikshit took this to be sent by Narayana. He knew that Narayana, Lord Krishna, had saved him when he was burned in the womb of his mother. And if he were to be killed by a snake bite, it would also take place by the will of the Lord. The devotee never goes against the will of the Lord. Anything sent by God is a blessing for the devotee. Therefore Maharaj Parikshit was neither afraid nor bewildered by such things. That is the sign of a pure devotee of the Lord. Om Agyana Timarandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Shtapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Purjana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha He Krishna Kruna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Does Maharaj have a comment?
Remembering the Supreme Personality of Godhead in all circumstances is glorified and is required. And the Narayana Parayana, the devotee who's completely surrendered to the Lord, is always remembering the Lord. And part of that remembering is that he knows what his duty is to the Lord. And Parikshit Maharaj knew that his duty in this circumstance was not to get an army and try to defend himself or beg for forgiveness, for protection. No, he didn't ask for those things because he knew that the Lord is doing his job well. He's promised that he will give protection to his devotee under all circumstances, and he's the supreme controller. So he's thinking, why should I ask him for a favor as if he's not doing his duty properly, he doesn't know what he's supposed to do. He knows exactly what's going on and how things are being done. Even if it appears to be otherwise, it may appear that this is just a fluke accident. I had nothing to do with it, and if I notify the Lord, I'm sure he'll want to. A very advanced devotee doesn't even bother to do that. Although there's nothing particularly wrong with bringing something to the attention or asking the Lord for confirmation. But such a devotee like Maharaj Parikshit is even beyond that. He doesn't even flinch. He doesn't unflinching. He doesn't flinch even when death comes suddenly. Not even, you wouldn't, that would be the last place you'd expect it to come from. Yeah. The son of a pious Brahmin. And he's just out. But, so he knows his duty. And we should follow that. Try to know our duty in all circumstances. What would be my duty in this circumstance? What is my duty in this circumstance? What should I do in that circumstance? Of course, the devotee doesn't just go around thinking about what possible things he could run into and how would he react. But at the same time, he does have to do that while he's performing any particular service. Now I'm performing this service, and therefore he thinks ahead how to make sure that I can do my service as properly as possible. So, for example, he always wants to make sure that I'm following the instructions of the Shastras and my spiritual master. Because if I'm not doing that, then my whole platform is very tenuous, it's very weak. How can I do the right thing if I'm not doing what I was told to do? At least that. If let's say I'm told to go and find someone. So if I'm out doing that, attempting my best to carry out the order that Krishna has given me or the spiritual master has given me, then if something happens and I'm unable to carry out that, at least I've tried. I'm doing that. But if I'm doing something else, I'm not paying attention to my original duty, then I'm taking responsibility for myself. You cannot expect, for example, an insurance company. They promise to give insurance for the driver of a car, but they have a few stipulations. They say it has to be, you can't be driving the car in a river or in the ocean or on places where there's no roads. Then we don't insure that. We insure on the roads that are authorized. So in the same way, we can be sure that we'll be protected by Krishna in all circumstances. And if it appears like he's not protecting us, that might be our lack of faith. Because in all circumstances, he protects according to the reciprocation of the devotee. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maharaj. Yes, Raga Prabhu? He protects according to the surrender of the devotee, was that it? But we know according to the reciprocation of the devotee. So Parikshit Maharaj was a pure devotee, so he knows what his duty to the Lord is in all circumstances. And so due to this, he's never afraid because he knows that he's always under the protection of the Lord. And I read where Srila Prabhupada was speaking about this protection of the Lord in a nice purport. Let's see. Sorry, I'm having trouble finding it. But Krishna is always protecting his devotees, so the devotee doesn't have to have any fear. And like Maharaj was saying, if we may think or have some doubt that Krishna isn't protecting us, then that may just be a lack of faith, just a misconception. So that can be removed with knowledge. When we hear more about the Supreme Lord, then we can gain more faith and not have any fear or impediments in our devotional service. And here in this purport, Srila Prabhupada is saying, of course, Krishna is giving all living entities protection, even in their rebellious condition. Eko bahunam yo vidadati kaman. Without Krishna's protection, we cannot live for a second. When we admit and recognize Krishna's kindness, we become happy. Krishna is protecting us at every moment, but we do not realize this because we have taken life at our own risk. Krishna gives us a certain amount of freedom, saying, all right, do whatever you like, as far as possible. I will give you protection. However, when the living entity is fully surrendered to Krishna, Krishna takes total charge and gives special protection. If a child grows up and doesn't care for his father and acts freely, what can his father do? He can only say, do whatever you like. But when a son puts himself fully under his father's protection, he receives more care. As Krishna states in the 9th chapter of Bhagavad Gita 9:29, Samoham sarvabhuteshu name dvesho stinapriyaha ye bhajanti tu mam bhaktya mayi te teshu chapyaham. I envy no one, nor am I partial to anyone. I am equal to all, but whoever renders service unto me in devotion is a friend, is in me, and I am also a friend to him. How can Krishna be envious of anyone? Everyone is Krishna's son. Similarly, how can Krishna be an enemy toward anyone? Since all living entities are Krishna's sons, he is everyone's friend. Ultimately, we are not taking advantage of his friendship, and that is our disease. Once we recognize Krishna as our eternal father and friend, we can understand that he is always protecting us, and in this way we can be happy. So there's an interesting point in there. Srila Prabhupada was also making the point that Krishna is even protecting those who aren't surrendered to him. So what to speak of one who's fully dependent on him? Of course, they'll be completely protected. We can see every living entity is protected by the Lord. Krishna is arranging the air that's going into our lungs, whether we're a devotee or just some demon doing terrible things, they're also breathing. So everyone's actually being protected by Krishna. Even the animals, they're getting all the food that they need. People are getting all the food, water, necessities of life that they need. So everyone's protected by him. So one doesn't have to have any doubt that if they surrender to the Supreme Lord in all circumstances, that there will be some lack of protection or some difficulty for them. Well, there's always difficulties in the material world, but Krishna even explains that in the Bhagavad Gita. He explains that the material world is a place of miseries. So I think that's helpful to keep in mind so that we don't get some kind of mistrued expectation. If we're thinking the material world is a nice place, then we'll be very confused all the time, because the person who creates it explains that it's a place of miseries. And in the dictionary, misery is described as a state or feeling of great distress or discomfort of mind and body. So that describes wherever we are in the material world. So I found that really helpful to keep in mind, because then we can have the proper expectation for what the material world is like. And Srila Prabhupada was saying in this one purport in the Path of Perfection, chapter 10, he was saying, Sri Krishna frankly says that it is not possible to avoid misery in this material world, because this world is meant for misery. Unless miseries are present, we cannot come to Krishna consciousness. Misery serves as an impetus to elevate us to Krishna consciousness. So, a devotee doesn't have to be disturbed by some discomforts of the material world, because they can just take it as the mercy of Krishna. Okay, there's some disturbance in the material world, no problem. That's going to help me surrender more to Krishna. This devotee, Parmeshwar Prabhu, who Bhakti Avatar is traveling with now, he always explains it really nicely, where he explains that whatever situation I'm in, whatever the circumstances, this is the perfect situation. Krishna has arranged the perfect situation for me to chant more purely. Because that's the position when one engages in devotional service. When one surrenders to the Lord, then Krishna takes charge of them. And we don't have to try to make some material adjustment or think of some way that we can change things to make it easier or more comfortable or better. No, it's actually perfect. Whatever situation I'm in right now is Krishna's perfect arrangement for me to surrender unto him more, to chant more purely. And there's a nice verse in the Bhagavad Gita, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 14, Text 8, that describes this mindset of a devotee of the Lord. Tate nukampam susamikshamano bunjana evatma kritam vipakam hridvag vapurbir vidahan namaste jiveta yo mukti pade sadayabak. My dear Lord, one who earnestly waits for you to bestow your causeless mercy upon him, all the while patiently suffering the reactions of his past misdeeds and offering you respectful obeisances with his heart, words, and body, is surely eligible for liberation, for it has become his rightful claim. So this is the devotee. They're patiently awaiting the mercy of the Lord, but they're not disturbed by any disturbances in life. They're also seeing that as his mercy. They're seeing whatever past misdeeds I've done, I should be suffering way more. But but Krishna is just giving me the most minimal amount of the real suffering due. But that's not to be confused with Maharaj Parikshit here. He doesn't have any material contamination or material motives or bad karma. He's a pure devotee, but still this nicely describes the mindset of a pure devotee. I can read the purport to this verse just because it's very encouraging. Srila Sridhar Swami explains in his commentary that just as a legitimate son has to simply remain alive to gain an inheritance from his father, one who simply remains alive in Krishna consciousness, following the regulative principles of Bhakti Yoga, automatically becomes eligible to receive the mercy of the personality of Godhead. In other words, he will be promoted to the kingdom of God. The word susamikshamana indicates that a devotee earnestly awaits the mercy of the Supreme Lord, even while suffering the painful effects of previous sinful activities. Lord Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita that a devotee who fully surrenders unto him is no longer liable to suffer the reactions of his previous karma. However, because in his mind the devotee may still maintain the remnants of his previous sinful mentality, the Lord removes the last vestiges of the enjoying spirit by giving his devotee punishments that may sometimes resemble sinful reactions. Just to make a distinction here, I was reading this verse because it's very helpful and encouraging. But Maharaj Parikshit, this whole pastime is being enacted under the Leela Shakti of the Lord. So this is like the personal play of the Lord, in which his pure devotees are the actors, in order to carry out a particular purpose. So it's not that Maharaj Parikshit has his previous karma and remnants of a sinful mentality still, but he's an eternally liberated soul, a pure devotee, under the Leela Shakti of the Lord, like a play. So just to make the distinction between the two things that are being spoken. The purpose of the entire creation of God is to rectify the living entity's tendency to enjoy without the Lord, and therefore the particular punishment given for a sinful activity is specifically designed to curtail the mentality that produced the activity. Although a devotee has surrendered to the Lord's devotional service, until he is completely perfect in Krishna consciousness, he may maintain a slight inclination to enjoy the false happiness of this world. The Lord therefore creates a particular situation to eradicate this remaining enjoying spirit. This unhappiness suffered by a sincere devotee is not technically a karmic reaction. It is rather the Lord's special mercy for inducing his devotee to completely let go of the material world and return home back to Godhead. A sincere devotee earnestly desires to go back to the Lord's abode. Therefore, he willingly accepts the Lord's merciful punishment and continues offering respects and obeisances to the Lord with his heart, words, and body. Such a bona fide servant of the Lord, considering all hardship a small price to pay for gaining the personal association of the Lord, certainly becomes a liberated son of God, as indicated here by the words Daya Bhak. Just as one cannot approach the sun without becoming fire, one cannot approach the Supreme Pure, Lord Krishna, without undergoing a rigid purificatory process, which may appear like suffering, but which is in fact a curative treatment administered by the personal hand of the Lord. So we can know that at any time and in any circumstance, we're being protected by Krishna, who is personally arranging things for our purification, for us to chant more purely. So Maharaj Parikshit, as an eternally liberated soul, completely surrendered to Krishna, he's being engaged in this pastime of the Lord, where we're going to hear more. It's actually quite mysterious, this whole chapter. We're going to hear more of how the Brahmana boy curses Parikshit Maharaj, and how he happily accepts this as the will of the Lord. He doesn't try to make any separate arrangement, but he accepts it as the will of the Lord, and then engages in this amazing, pure activity of the hearing and the chanting of the Srimad Bhagavatam with Shukadev Goswami at Naimisharanya for the benefit of all living entities. So are there any comments or questions on this verse? Yes, Murari Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for class. Very nice. I was just thinking about that, Maharaj Parikshit and many others, like devotees, also Vidura or Dhritarashtra. They go through the episode of life that Krishna just showed them. They showed like go more deeper in their devotion or to surrender. And we also, like in our life, we can have this kind of like, how to say, doors or windows. We shall see it that it's time, to go like more deeper or to more surrender to the Lord. So it's also like, I was thinking about it, how it is important to even see the situation like that it is actually Krishna's arrangement for us. Because we can like Maharaj Parikshit, he was not protesting, but we have sometimes the tendency to protest, the arrangement which is Krishna is giving us. So, okay, I will do, but later. We know that we shall do, but later. We are putting this form of surrender, which is giving us on the later time again and again. So, but actually, in these examples, we can see that we shall try to see the Lord's hand in our lives. So, I was just thinking.
Okay, thank you, Prabhu. Does anyone have any other comments or questions? One thing on that point, Valmiki Prabhu had told me how there's no problems in Krishna consciousness. He said it's just a matter of what we decide to do about these different situations. There's no actual problem, but the thing that matters is just how we decide to deal with everything. So are we going to use the situation as an opportunity to surrender more to Krishna? or as an opportunity to be more in Maya, more in illusion, just trying to adjust the material world and these things. Is there any other comment or question from anybody? So we'll hear more about how Maharaj Parikshit is making this, is fully surrendered to the Lord in this circumstance, and we can become very inspired by his example and try to follow in his footsteps. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.